What's the good word, Josh? Your boy DKB here. So we've already unloaded wide receiver Mecole Hardman. The next shoe to drop, realistically, was going to be defensive end Carl Lawson for us, right? You take a look at the defensive line rotation, and he's fallen way down the depth chart ever since he suffered that back injury during the preseason. That's kind of held him out, obviously for health purposes. We've seen the rise and continued emergence of not only Bryce Huff, but Jermaine Johnson. You have your recent first round pick in Will McDonald IV that people are going to want to see out on the field more so often, especially after what we've seen in the preseason. Even though we've heard Olbrich talk about him still adjusting, learning the nuances of the defense, still needing to gain weight and some of that grown man strength that Robert Salas talked about. But nonetheless, Carl Lawson is essentially a very affordable option that isn't getting enough playing time to really make the $8 million guarantee that we gave him after his contract got restructured this season really feasible, right? And so hopefully the ideal path is that we can trade and turn him into a draft asset, or we can go player for player and get somebody at a position of need. And it just so happens that we have two particular teams in the NFC, one with better playoff chances than the other, but definitely both deep in the race at this point in time, that looks like they can make a strong push for Carl Lawson, and it makes sense for their teams right now. So the first team would be the Rams. You're taking a look at a 3-4 record for them, and this is much better than a lot of teams predicted with how they've had to, do a sort of mass exodus with the talent on the roster, especially on the defensive side. But they've been actually, they've been able to go out there and get themselves some wins, put up some pretty strong production, so some gutsy performances, which we're very accustomed to. And so you start to kind of have that school of thought, if you're a Rams fan or within that coaching staff and front office, that maybe you guys can still make a playoff push. Now, do you have a roster that can put you over the edge of a Super Bowl caliber team? Who knows? Ideally, on paper, it doesn't look that way, right? But you never know how things can shake out. You want to at least get into the dance so you can kind of see what your partner's going to look like and what you can get done. So Carl Lawson, definitely a fit for this Rams franchise. They only have 12 sacks this year in 7 games, which is a far cry from what they've seen before. They've opted for the youth movement, as we talked about. They've seen their playoff window closing, but this season has kind of opened up some eyes still into what may still be an option for them to not only transition a roster to a more prominent players at some pivotal positions for them, but maybe you can make the transition happen on a positive note, right? Which, being able to reach the playoffs and stuff, would be a great barometer and great expectation setter for a young franchise, or at least a young group that they're looking to turn to. Carl Lawson would only help, right? You take a look at what he's done over the course of his career, and he's always been an above average to an elite pressure defender, right? He may not always be able to convert those into a high level of sacks, right? Not reaching double digits, but he's always been able to go out there and impact the quarterback on a game per game basis. So this is exactly the type of player that any defense could really use, right? And you take a look at what he did last year for us, his first year coming off of that Achilles injury, and he was able to go out there and get 7 sacks. So it's not like he's busted goods or anything, even with the ailments that he has this year with the back. The Rams, taking a look at their situation, limited options due to the amount of moves they made in recent years with, strong, top level talents that they've traded for. Cap space isn't really in the best area, so this would actually be a very cap-friendly move for them compared to anything else they could go out there and try to get done, especially as we head to the, we get closer to this Week 8 deadline. So from what I heard, the rumors out there are that we've already had some talks with the Rams about Carl Lawson. And again, from our side, this works perfectly. You give some additional snaps to some of the younger guys on the roster. Right now, Carl Lawson's only taken up 24% of the snaps on the season so far, which I think is like 77 or 78 snaps. And this was all per the NFL Analysis Network, right? We didn't get any names in terms of sources or any of that. But something interesting to consider. Now, there wasn't a trade package or anything that was really attached to the situation, but it's definitely notable that you have a wild card contender that could be looking to make a late move to increase their chances here, especially with the defense floundering maybe a little bit more so than what you would expect from the offense with some of the players they're seeing break out, like Puka Nacua still having Cooper Kupp over there, having that running back room. So the other contender, a much stronger player in the playoff race, we're taking a look at the Seahawks here. They have a 4-2 record. This was actually a conversation that was broached by Sports Illustrated's Corbin K. Now, he's predicting this trade interest, and really this is a move that I think makes sense for a lot of people. You take a look at Pete Carroll. He's made some comments once their star pass rusher Uche Nwosu went down. Season-ending pectoral injury is what it looks like from what I heard. And so you're going to have to replace his production with the committee, which is what Pete Carroll has, essentially admitted, and that they're not really looking for external options. They'll try the in-house stuff. But the key term and what he was saying, paraphrasing, was yet. Now, we've heard a lot of coaches, be hard, fast, and loyal, in press interviews and all that kind of stuff just for them to backtrack, not even 24 to 48 hours later. Not them personally, a lot of that has to do with the front office. But basically, you can never 100% trust what a coaching staff is saying when it comes to these players. You have to make the best business decisions for your roster as a whole. And so, why have to get 3 or 4 players to make up one player's production when you can have 1 or 2 potentially get that done, whether you need to bring in an external guy or not. And as mentioned, Carl Lawson will bring the pressure in that unit. Also, interestingly enough, he's almost essentially an identical physical archetype for a guy like Uchenna Nwosu. So there's not really a whole lot of there's not a wholesale different approach they would have to take to plugging him into that roster and seeing him hopefully run crazy against NFC opponents this season. So it's not the perfect match in the world, but this is pretty darn close to that, which I think is the most you can ask for. He's going to be due $3.6 million of his $6 million salary for any team that ends up trading for Carl Lawson. So, again, from a cap-friendly standpoint, this works out in a lot of teams' favors. And so it's at least worth noting. There's probably going to be some concerns about the injury, but we did hear from Carl Lawson within the last couple of weeks with him stating, he's still dealing with the back stuff, but he is feeling healthier. He's feeling a lot more explosive. He's really just kind of focused on his rehabilitation and going out there and being able to dominate the minimal snaps that he's getting within this defensive line rotation. So this one is more of an interesting trade situation because we did have a proposed trade package here. Right now, for the Seahawks, they would be trading wide receiver D. Eskridge and a 2024 6th-round pick to the Jets. The Jets would give up Carl Lawson, and we would replace, we would swap for a 2024 7th-round pick. So late day 3 pick swap, and then 2 players at positions of strength for each team, in which they could ultimately end up being, traded or cut or whatever the case is, right? Kind of a very diminished goods for each specific team. Now, the only thing I really don't love about this is the player-for-player aspect. Now, D. Eskridge isn't a guy that I loved coming out of the 2021 draft. I know, for excuse me, I forget what you call it. For the people that love the interesting titles and stuff, it would be, that D. Eskridge was a former 2nd-round pick in the 2021 draft. I would still prefer Terrace Marshall if we're going to go, a player route in this case. But nonetheless, 2021 2nd-round draft pick. The thing that I don't love is I don't really see a strong upside with a guy like D. Eskridge. I don't see an obvious fit within our offense for a guy like D. Eskridge, especially based on the recent experience we've had with Mecole Hardman. You take a look at what D. Eskridge is and what he could be. He's a undersized wide receiver. He's really going to only fit into a slot wide receiver role. He's not going to be able to win out there on the boundary against these NFL size cornerbacks. And then also he has some of his own drama he's coming into, right? He did just finish his 6-game suspension for violating the personal conduct policy. That seemed to be centered around some kind of previous domestic violence incident that he had. I don't know all the particulars. Doesn't really matter, but I know that's something that would probably scare Joe Douglas taking a look at it. And, of course, they'll do their due diligence. But still, nonetheless, you don't really want to bring in somebody that's coming in off of, a bad light, for example. Outside of that, though, he is coming from Western Michigan, so if there is anybody that can make this staff a little bit more comfortable with bringing him on, it would be Zaire Barnes, who could give us some inside info for him, being former teammates. But, as I mentioned, the upside isn't great. Basically, he would be a gadget player or a speed slot threat with, above average catch and run ability, but he doesn't have great hands. He's not going to be able to catch in traffic. And so literally you would be betting on him becoming one of the NFL's best yards after catch beast. And we haven't seen that from him over his tenure with the Seahawks so far, where I don't think he's exceeded 150 yards in 20 games so far. So it's not a guy that I think has an obvious fit within this offense. Doesn't look great. There's not a ton of upside that I will look forward to with this guy. If you're going to go gadget player, you have Xavier Gibson, and I do think the upside with him is definitely a lot stronger. So it was interesting taking a look at some of his scouting reports and seeing that there were second and, third round grades for him generally. But, it is what it is. Again, me personally don't love it. Maybe some of you guys out there do actually like the player. Let me know what your thoughts are about it. But I don't think there's another obvious player swap there that we would be interested in. But nonetheless, even if we just settle for draft picks, I would be all for it for a guy that, hasn't even cracked 100 snaps in our defensive line rotation. But let me know what you guys think. If you're a Rams Seahawks fan, let me know what you think about the fit here. Obviously, on our end, Jets fans, let me know what are you settling for when it comes to a Carl Lawson? Are you looking for a early day 3 pick, or would you prefer some kind of player for player trade with a guy like Carl Lawson? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.